Welcome back. I thought I would do something different by reading you the first chapter of a book I'm working on. This is the third in a series of books. The first one is finished and looking for a publisher and an agent and an editor and all those good things. The second one actually isn't written, and this would be the third one. It's called Doremi Foster Flies, and without going into too much explanation about why, the story involves at this point, two girls who have some remarkable abilities. They do not have any magic or any superhuman abilities, but they can do things that normally you would not expect young girls, at this point they are 14 years old, to be able to do. Some of you may have heard The Fault in Our Stars as read by John Green, where he explained it seemed kind of odd for him to be reading the voice of a 17-year-old girl, Hazel Grace, and this will be even stranger because I'm reading the part of a 14-year-old girl. So stretch your imagination and suspend your disbelief, but this is chapter 1 of Doremi Foster Flies. I guess a helicopter might be better. I rode one at the Perchville Ice Festival once, but right now it's hard to imagine anything more wonderful than a seaplane. The hills below us are covered with tall pines reaching up toward us, but we can see right through them to the forest floor. There's water everywhere, varying shades of blue, green, sometimes even brown, little lakes and ponds dotting the landscape with thin ribbons of glistening water, creeks, streams, and rivers, linking them all together. My heart races when I can make out occasional waterfalls cascading between small pools perched high above the valley floor, and the one wide, winding river making its way south to Lake Superior. The Massasauga takes its name from the only venomous snake native to these parts. The rattler is barely dangerous and not very aggressive. You find one in the woods, you can almost ignore it, almost forget there's any danger in its bite at all. Kind of like flying a seaplane, I guess, when you can forget that you and your pilot are just a pair of 14-year-old girls, and the only way you could get hold of this wonderful, beautiful seaplane was to steal it just an hour or two ago. I figure we've got about another hour before we need to seriously start worrying about fuel, the wild-haired girl handling the controls shouts above the roar of the engine, bringing me out of my scenery-induced reverie. It isn't always Xander's nature to be concerned with practical problems. That's more my area, so I know I'd better take it seriously. How far will that take us? I ask, shouting back. Another 100 miles, more or less, depends on the wind. I nod and go back to looking out the window. Love the seaplane, but it isn't any jet. 300 miles, not bad for a morning, but what will we do then? Still so far to go. It's what, 2,000 or 3,000 miles across Canada? Then up Alaska before we can try to get across to Asia somehow, and I don't even want to think about that yet. One thing at a time, I remind myself. I look out the window. I look over at Xander. I look out the window again. Nothing but lakes and rivers. A strange wilderness, the kind of view that must have been familiar to the northern Indians before Columbus, I think, and then laugh to myself. Well, if the northern Indians had been in a beaver seaplane, they would have taken canoes, I suppose, and been that much closer to the land. They couldn't imagine getting around in these flying machines, but now planes on floats or skis in the winter are the most common mode of transportation in the vast expanse of land between the U.S. border and Hudson Bay. I had read somewhere that there were more light planes in use than cars in some areas. Closing my eyes, I flashed back to the pages I had read. Breaking the Ice, Restless in the Grave, Bush Pilot Chronicles. Fictional tales and real-life stories. As usual, the answers lay in those pages. I tap Xander on the arm to take her attention from the gauges and the horizon she's watching so carefully. Take us a little more to the north, I shout. We're going to need fuel. Don't you think we're going to need to move a little closer to civilization? She looked confused. Just the opposite. Get away and look for a fuel dump. A what? Fuel dump. Kind of a wilderness gas stop for light planes. They don't have Circle K's around, you know, so they plant fuel tanks around. Going to be hard to spot, though. Going to have to keep as low as you dare. I thought I was, but okay, we'll push it. What are we looking for? A dock, probably. A dock with barrels on it, ideally without any people around. Got it, she replied, and went back to looking ahead, gently guiding us toward the northwest, a hint of tension creasing her face as she nosed the plane even lower, till we were doing little more than skimming the trees below. Tension in Xander was rare. I hoped we didn't have to do this for too long, so I, too, went back to scanning the land below us. Just minutes later, Xander called out excitedly, "Moose!" And sure enough, two brown creatures, a mother and her calf, were crossing a shallow lake below. Do you think one of them has any fuel? I joked. Xander laughed, but I almost wished I hadn't asked. I could tell she was stressed, sailing along this close to the ground, and the ever-decreasing fuel supply had to be on her mind. "Let's keep looking," I cried. Hills, trees, water, trees, hills, trees, water. It wasn't feeling promising, and it had been untold miles since we had seen any sign of civilization. Had I made a mistake bringing us north, away from the roads that skirted the border? If we ran out of fuel here, we'd be lost. And of course, no one had the faintest idea we were out here. Fuel dumps. Me and my big ideas. And then I saw something. "There!" I shouted, pointing just slightly ahead and to the right. As I had expected, it was a dock, sitting just offshore in a medium-sized lake, and I could see 6 orange oil drums stacked on it, which couldn't make me happier. There was no guarantee they were airplane fuel, of course, but what else would they be? I was less happy to see another plane already tied up there. I would have liked to have slipped in, borrowed some fuel, and continued on our way. I didn't want to get tangled up trying to explain why 2 14-year-old girls were flying a plane alone in the bush. "I see it!" shouted Xander, easily banking the plane around in that direction. There was a windsock tied to a corner of the dock, but it hung limply. Without any wind, I knew Xander could come in from any direction she wanted. She first made a wide circle around the whole area, and I thought she was trying to decide where to approach from when she looked across at me to ask, "Do you see anyone around?" I knew then she had the same concerns I did, but she had to know as I did. We didn't really have any choice. "No, but it doesn't matter. We need to see if we can get fuel." Xander nodded. "Let's drop in for brunch then." "You comfortable bringing it in?" Xander laughed at me and in her best taunting voice said, "You think you can land a passenger jet full of kids and I can't bring in a little seaplane? I have read everything you have getting ready for this. You just buckle your seatbelt, put your tray in the upright position, and prepare for landing." Truth is, I was glad to let her keep the controls. I have landed a passenger jet full of kids. It's a long story, but I'd just as soon never have to do anything like that again. And just as promised, she brought us in smooth and steady. The lake was smooth, and without any wind, it was easy to circle around, taxiing toward the dock. As we got closer, she cut the engine, and grabbing a paddle we found in the back of the plane, opening the door and stepping onto one of the floats, paddled the last few yards to the dock. There was a collection of ropes, hooks, and eyes on the dock, and we used these to lash the plane up on the opposite side of the smaller plane already tied to the dock. The 2 planes bobbed quietly on the water, and after several hours in the roar of the plane, the silence seemed, as they say, almost deafening. We finally felt we could relax for a moment, as there didn't seem to be anyone around at all. I should have known it was too good to last. That's Chapter 1 of Doremi Foster Flies by Steve Clark. Don't forget to be awesome. I will talk to you again soon, hopefully.